Welcome everybody. We'll kick the meeting off, and so excited to see everybody today. Mr. Pro Tem, thank you so much for being here and your leadership through this whole process. And Mr. Speaker, thank you, and to all the teams that have worked so hard this whole session. Just thank you for all your hard work, and really excited about this new process. I think the transparency process. I think Oklahomans have enjoyed to see exactly how their taxpayer dollars are spent. And I know it's been fun and unusual and exciting as we're getting to this point. But I hear we're really close to a deal, which is very exciting. And I've been really clear about my priorities, so I'm not going to rehash all those today. And you guys are probably tired of hearing me talk about them. But since we're so close, I've heard some other things. Will the governor sign the budget? And I want to be clear that if we can get this, land the plane today, get this thing across the finish line, and you guys can kind of finalize the budget, and we can do a couple other things: preserve the current funding structure for the Quick Action Closing Fund, which has about $20 million in it; preserve the Tribal Litigation Fund; cap the percentages around judicial pay at around 7%, something like that. I think that's reasonable, and keep that for district courts only. And then we can get the framework for business courts across the finish line. And business courts, I think, are going to continue to make Oklahoma the most business-friendly state. So if we can put those four things in here, and we can get this done today, then I will not veto this budget. And I know you guys are really close on a few of the final items, and so I'll let y'all discuss those. But does that sound reasonable to you, Mr. Pro Tem, to get this done today?
Well, I appreciate what you're saying here. I think we have some questions on it. Yeah, I think this does not sound unreasonable at all, what you're talking about. But just have, I think, give my members and the House members some opportunity to ask you questions on some of those, particularly the business court. What does that look like? But some of the others as well. But yeah, I think that's a good framework for discussion this morning. I appreciate all your thoughts on this.
Excellent. Mr. Speaker, you guys think you can finalize the budget? I think y'all are really close. I think some legacy closing funds, some different things that you guys are working on, some one-time investments. But it's my understanding we're really close. And those items that I mentioned, and you guys know my framework that I've kind of talked about the whole time.
Governor, thank you. I'll speak loud because you wouldn't let me have a microphone this morning at this meeting. No, thank you. I think the House and Senate have made some great progress on this. I appreciate your willingness to convey to us here in the final hours of budget negotiations your position. We've always sought to honor and incorporate your priorities in the budget. I think this is something the House can definitely work through, and looking forward to working with our Senate counterparts today to finalize this agreement for the people of the state of Oklahoma and fulfill our constitutional duty.
Good. Well, I'm going to just let y'all discuss. Mr. Pro Tem, you said you may have some questions for me. Do you want me to stick around for specific questions? I'd be happy to.
Yeah, I think if you'd be willing to and have the availability to get some clarification on some of these. I don't want to necessarily dominate the questions, but just on the business courts that I already brought up, what would you find as a win on that this year? Because I don't think they're really well defined within my caucus or my chamber of exactly what those are. Is that putting together a task force? Is there language out there that we're already working on? What does that actually look like?
Yeah, thank you for that. I think somebody, maybe a counterpart in the Senate, Eccles, is working on it. But basically, it's just to start setting that up, put a task force together to get those, rolled out by maybe 26. But to start this process for business courts, Texas just passed them and kind of came live. So we were going to do one in Oklahoma City, one in Tulsa. But as far as how the judges are appointed, that's all details to work out. It's not like we have to get this up and running right now, but it's a signal to the business community that we want them to know that we want to be the business headquarter capital of the world, and there's not going to be a lot of frivolous lawsuits going on in Oklahoma, and a business-to-business exchange kind of court system with more highly trained business attorneys is kind of the thought process that Delaware has, and Texas just set up. And Eccles, I know you've been researching this with, I don't know exactly who in the Senate you're working with, but you might speak to it as well.
Well, and actually, as of now, I'm not. That was going to be one of my asks when I was told. So this is, Ms. Pro Tem, about 24 hours worth of work on it. We have some language, but my ask would be, if it's something we want to go down, you have some skilled lawyers in the Senate, and whoever you or anyone else you want, I'd love to maybe share it with them. There's no pride in authorship. This is just trying to create a framework that we could work towards several years, 2 years down the road. But I could share thoughts on that. But Ms. Pro Tem, to be clear, it's in the thought stage. We would need to talk it out with your leadership, whoever you would want. And I do believe it's close enough we could come up with an agreed product for implementation a couple years from now with whoever your team would decide would be the right person.
All right. Yeah, I just wanted to make sure it wasn't something that was already, formed out. I think my first initial blush would be I would assign Leader McCourtney to work with you on that, and then he can pull in whoever we need, because I won't be able to see it through to its finish if it's a couple of years down the road type of issue. So, Senator McCourtney, if we move forward on some kind of agreement, I want you to bird dog that one.
And it's just setting up the framework, Mr. Pro Tem, Mr. Speaker, and it's not like these courts would roll out this year. Set the framework that just says, hey, we're going to put a task force together. How that works. Texas has a model we could use, but yeah, it's going to take a couple of years to get it finalized, and how we appoint those judges, and et cetera.
Good. I'm not familiar with the Texas structure. If they have a Court of Civil Appeals and a Supreme Court and a Court of Criminal Appeals like we do and all that. So just the nuances of that. I appreciate your willingness to work on that. On the judicial pay, are there any strings attached to that, or is that just a pay raise pulling the 17.9? I think the Judicial Compensating Commission recommended. Are you just saying you just want to lower that, or are there any other things that you see as contingent on that?
Yeah, I thought 7 or 18% seemed like a big bump right off the bat, and so kind of stair stepping that in. I know our judges do a great job, and we need to make sure we pay market. But 7, 8, 9, somewhere around there, just bringing that back, and without action from the House to Senate, it automatically goes to 18%. So the only caveat would be, let's focus on the district courts only, that court system, and let's do 7, 8, 9%, whatever you guys decide. It would be one of the requests.
Okay, so the only caveat from your perspective would be district courts only.
Correct.
And can you walk me through some of that logic, I guess, on what that is? Just the pay structure is not as competitive there? I'm not familiar.
That's I guess my opinion, that we're having to compete. The district courts in eastern Oklahoma are going to be picked off from federal bench, federal things. And so just making sure that we're paying market to those guys would be something that I'd be interested in doing. Going up to 18% is a big lift for taxpayers. And so let's modestly, give someone a pay increase, but let's only do it at 7%.
And then on the tribal litigation funding, I understand you're wanting to keep that at, I guess it's housed at OMES currently. This conversation we had on Wednesday or Thursday last week about the AG fund and all that. But I would contemplate you don't want to change the structure of that. That still requires the joint committee on tribal relations to approve those contracts. Is that the way you envision that?
Correct. Yeah. I'm not saying change the structure of it. I'm just saying, let's not sweep that over because that's already in place. That fund's already there. So when the governor is and our council is defending the state of Oklahoma, we still have to go to the legislature, the way it was set up to get approval. We're fine with all that. We're just saying, let's not monkey with those funds. I think there's only been 300,000 spent out of there, but, the state of Oklahoma was just sued, for example, or excuse me, the city of Tulsa was just sued by the Department of Justice. So that's a case that we probably want to bring back before the joint committee to, at least that's what our attorneys are working on, that we need to help the city of Tulsa. They're having to defend a lawsuit. We think we need to enter an appearance also to help them. So that's kind of what that funding's for, is to be able to protect Oklahomans. We just don't want, we're not asking for any new money. We're just saying leave that fund the way it is, leave the setup the way it is.
Well, I've said so privately and in media interviews, but I do want to publicly thank you and your team for the work you did on the compacts. I'm glad the joint committee affirmed those. I appreciate very much you and Mr. Pemberton on working in good faith with our tribes on that issue. So I'll open up to any questions that people from my chamber may have on clarification for any of these issues you delineated.
And I'm getting clarification. If I didn't say it, but the leaving the quick action closing fund in place, whatever's in there, we've committed money, we've obligated money from the state, and an additional 20 million is what, if I didn't say that.
Right, so that was gonna be my question. So you're not asking for a flat budget on that, you're asking for a new $20 million appropriation into your fund?
I'm glad you asked that, because I will absolutely take it down to a flat budget if we get a tax cut. If you want to make that trade, we'll do it right now.
Okay.
If we don't do the tax cut, then, yeah, I think 20 million for economic development would be, is a good request.
So we've had quite a few conversations in the last few meetings about your fund. There are some projects that money's been encumbered for 4 years, maybe even more than that. There's been some conversations about how long is reasonable to encumber that number. Do you have any thoughts as we work through all of that stuff, maybe even in the future? It seems like, I mean, the word quick is in there. So a 4-year, like, hey, we think that you're gonna come to Oklahoma, we're gonna encumber this money for 4 or 5, how many ever years. I mean, as we move forward, do you have any thoughts on kind of how long we should let that hang out there?
It's a fair question, but just so everybody knows, no money ever goes out the door until a company performs. So they do an analysis, and so if you bring 500 employees or 300 or whatever the analysis is, you get X. So just to make sure, no money's out the door until a company performs according to the agreement. So, but it's a fair point. How long do these things go out there? But it's also a commitment from the state. I think we all could agree that if we're gonna give them a letter that says, if you bring 1,000 employees, we'll give you $1 million. And whether that's out there and they want to bring 1,000 or 1,000 employees in 1 year or 5 years, we don't really care. We still have the money. We have access to it. We're not opposed to having those conversations at all and putting time limits on there. But also some of these projects do take a time, to get approval, acquire land, put their engineering together, et cetera, et cetera. But I think it's a fair point. I don't know specifically if Commerce puts a deadline in there, but that's something we could certainly do in the future. We can put, hey, come back to us if you don't have this done in 3 years. Trust me, nobody wants to get them here quicker than we do. But make sure we know it's all the people's money. We're going to be good stewards, and we're never going to let that out the door until that company performs first.
Right, thanks. It's been a topic of our conversation, so love to get your input.
Yeah.
Love to work with you on that in the coming years. For sure.
Perfect. Let me know if you want me to push Commerce to put a deadline and say, hey, it's not encumbered anymore after 3 years, and whatever you guys tell us, we'll be happy to do it. Yes, sir.
Thank you, Governor, for being here. I'm not familiar with business courts. So are you looking for an appropriation this year for business courts, or just looking for the framework, knowing that in the out years, we're going to have to fund it? I'm a little
Just the framework. I don't even know what the funding would be. We're not anticipating more than maybe 2 or 3 judges. And it would only be it wouldn't be a slip and fall type case. This would just be a business to business dispute. Maybe something with shareholders, or if a board member is sued, or a merger, or just complicated business cases. That's at least what they do in Delaware. And we all know that, Elon just pulled out of Delaware. They're stumbling. Oklahoma has an opportunity to plant the flag to be a business-friendly, corporate headquartered state. And that's the only reason I think this would be really helpful for us. But there's no funding required. This is just, hey, let's set the framework and let's start doing some studying to how that would look. Do we want one in Tulsa, in Oklahoma City, and rural Oklahoma? Do we want just one in Oklahoma City? I think Texas put like eight different districts together. Delaware just has one, but they're a much smaller state area-wise than us. So that's all details that I think you guys can work out. I talked to the general counsel of some of our big headquartered companies who are currently headquartered in Delaware, and they're the ones that have given me some ideas that they would love to bring that information back to Oklahoma. But Delaware has 200 years worth of history, and they have the Chancery court system, and that's the only thing I'm trying to. I'm just suggesting that it would be good for some of our corporations.
Governor, thank you for being here. Always enjoy sitting down with you related to your closing fund request. And we talk about the dates of encumbrance. We're working off a letter that was provided to us by the Department of Commerce, and there are several that are encumbered that we don't have dates of when they were encumbered. And so I was just hopeful that you would encourage Commerce to tie those encumbrance dates to every project that is currently on the list shown as encumbered.
That's fair. Absolutely. Yeah. Please point that out. I didn't know that. And then Secretary Cockcroft has just told me that they do have, in most of these contracts do have dates on them. Is that correct?
Deadlines on the contracts, but if we can have a conversation after this, I'd love to be able to help out with that.
Well, if that's all the questions for me, I know you guys are going to get into the details about the rest of the budget items. Yes, sir.
Governor, just for a point of clarification, on the business court concept, who on your team is going to be the contact?
So Trevor Pemberton,
Okay.
Our general counsel, will make him available. He's done a lot of research on it. And we're here. We don't have a specific framework. I'm just encouraging how, yes plus time equals no. You guys have heard me say that before. And so that's why I'm just really pushing hard that if we can at least get this ball rolling, the way life works, if you get the snowball rolling downhill, you do whatever you can to keep up with it. And if we can get this thing in motion, then we will do what we need to do in 2 years to kind of get these finalized across the finish line. That's the reason I'm pushing so hard. So there's no fiscal impact. There's no money required. It's just, let's do the hard work to get this process started. And then we can, in future legislative sessions, we can figure out if it's 1 court, 2 courts, what the framework looks like. And I think that's also a signal to the business community that, hey, if you're looking for a business headquartered state, Oklahoma is the most business-friendly state in the country. And I think that all boats rise when we get that momentum and people see that about our state. And I think that'd be really important to be something we can all be really proud of.
Thank you, sir.
Well, thanks everybody. I appreciate it. And Mr. Pro Tem, I'm here if you guys need anything. But as y'all go through the individual budget items, I don't think I'll be any help with that.
Governor, thank you very much. And I just want to put everyone on notice that it doesn't look like we're walking out at any point. I've told my team that there may be opportunities that we need to walk out and huddle on something. There is no intent to be walking out today. There's an intent to get together and discuss whatever options the House and us are discussing. Thank you very much for this very thoughtful and reasonable approach. Appreciate it very much.
Thanks, Pro Tem.
Speaker, thank you, Governor. Thank you. Appreciate your time. Thanks, guys. right, Mr. Pro Tem, good morning, good to see you.
Good morning, how are you?
I'm well. Where shall we pick up?
That's a good question. I think, Friday, when we did I lose track of which counter was to which counter. But when we had a sheet, you gave us something, I think at 1 PM, and then we counted around 3 or something, but it broke down over the conversation that we just had on the vetoes. So the Senate is obviously want to take into account the whole picture before we make any agreements. We hear and think that the governor's requirements are quite reasonable, assuming that we can come to some agreement here. And so I don't want to agree and then have to go over and agree over the House on other things. So I think the framework is, I think we had very productive discussions on the sheriff issue. We had productive conversations on me and you sending language back and forth on the DV language. We had productive conversations on Guyman. I think we had productive conversations on assessments. And so if it pleases the House, I think we start from that. You gave us a proposal. This proposal dated 1 PM, the House offer. We countered with that, but our counter was, we were really concerned about potential vetoes, so we got caught up on that first part. So I think it'd be a good starting point to look and hear what your feedback is on our counter to your counter to our counter to their counter to whatever it was. I think that would be a good starting point. I don't think we need to go back and renegotiate all the stuff that we talked about on Friday morning unless y'all want to have discussions on that.
I think it's a great place to start. Thank you very much. And Chairman Wallace, let's pick up from there thank you again.
All right, good morning, everyone, as well. So then we go back to the point from Friday afternoon. The House had turned over a counter to your original offer. And then the counter to our counter is really, I think if you want to, let's just start line item. And I mean, I was very genuine when I said, is that a typo? I think we need to have a conversation about the LCF, and if we can get to an agreement. The House felt that we were asking for 350. You guys had offered 100. We just split it right there in the middle between zero, because you started at 0 and we were at 350 at 175. And then whenever I saw the number, I thought maybe you really wanted 1 in front of it, but I'm open.
Thank you for that. We intended to start at negative 350. No, I think we can talk about, I think it'd be more productive. I know it's important to the House that there is some kind of deposit above and beyond whatever the project's cost. We hear you on that. Our position on Friday was based on not coming to agreements on some other things, and then us coming over on the OSU and the DPS Phase 2 was what we were trying to get to, and we were including the interest in there. And so I think that's what part of the disagreement or misunderstanding between the two chambers. I think if we can go through, if it's agreeable to you all, going through the individual projects to see if we have agreement, and then talking about what the reasonable cash deposit is above and beyond that. We know that's important to you. I think it's important we both come out of here with wins for our individual chambers.
That is reasonable. I do want to make a comment. I've said it before. I think that we need to actually statutorily state that interest will stay in the fund, and I'm for that. And I'm going to assume the Senate is, because they were calculating it.
We were calculating based on the Board of Equalization deal. If that needs clarification, we're completely agreeable to finding that clarification. When you go line by line, I'm turning it over to Chairman Hall, and I'm not going to walk out of the room and then come back and cancel the meeting. We're going line by line with Chairman Hall. I am getting coffee though.
One thing I'd mentioned, and I think I shared this with you, Senator Hall, they were together, I think it was sometime Monday, of an accounting of what I felt like the project's cost would be. I think the House's position, we're in agreement with projects that were listed as a whole. We also agreed that we'd use the $20 million threshold for this year, FY '25, either paying out of LCF or paying cash for projects less than that. And so I think we're in agreement on the projects. I don't know necessarily need to go by them line by line other than the values. What is your thought?
Like, it's fine. I think for complete transparency, particularly since we're getting so close to the finish line, it may make some sense to just at least mention them out loud. And just to make sure that we concur. So, in working with, where the House was on the 20 million, anything that's, over $20 million, what I have down is the, two OU, the University Hospital Authority, projects, the engineering and the wet lab for $80 million apiece. Then I have the, Osuma, hospital, there in, with the completion of the Tulsa facility at $30 million. I have the OSBI new headquarters, at 27.5. I have the science building, through Osuma, at $80 million. And then I had the DPS phase 2, at $74 million for the over 20s.
That's correct. And then as a matter of legislation that was passed, there's a project that we have listed that is below 20, but statutorily it's been signed by the governor now, and for capital project here on this campus, $4.3 million.
We agree with that. We know that bill was signed by the governor, and was identified as an LCF project. And so we will count that certainly into the LCF projects. Also have the single pay projects, which would be the under 20 million. What I have on my list is the DEQ parking garage for 16 million. Have the Commerce of Rogers State for $10 million. Have through Ag, the FAPSI program for $5 million. Have the Troop F headquarters in Ardmore for $4 million. The transponder piece for $3 million. And then the animal diagnostic lab at OSU VMA for $20 million.
When we get to the FAPSI piece, there was two parts. There was a $5 million, and then there was an additional $1 million. So I believe on the House proposal, we have that at $6 million for FAPSI.
Yeah, thank you. I'm glad you brought that up. I mean, I guess my question to you, Mr. Chairman, there's a piece of that that is operational related, and then there's a piece for the actual capital investment. And so we can talk that through. It just seems to me that if it's an operational piece, it's going to be recurring, that $1 million would not be included in the single pay.
We can look at that again at Ag, but the request was for $2 million, $1 million for operation, an additional $1 million for capital investments. That's why we added the 5 and 1 to come up with 6.
Okay, we'll be fine with going to 6.
Thank you. Also, on the House sheet that we had tied together on the OETA transmitters, we'd also on our counter linked in the $2 million for OSU water quality. We'd had those tied together. You did not mention anything about that. I understand it's not a capital project, but I just want to point that out that at some point I'd like to readdress this.
Yeah, we're agreeable with readdressing it. I think our position is still of need to be a little bit further educated on that, but it's certainly something we're willing to talk about, at least the dollar amount and what we may do there.
Okay, I just want to make sure that we have it on the table to bring back up for discussion.
It's not lost on us. We'll circle back to it.
Thank you. So I would gather that on the capital projects, we're in agreement with the Senate and House on projects. Real question now is additional funds in LCF.
Mr. Chairman, one of the aforementioned huddles may be required right now just for us to talk. I think one of the things I would ask, this sheet that you all gave us at 1 and then we countered later, we're going, they're pretty close in alignment, but obviously we had the governor's closing fund going down. So if we come to all this, we understand there's changes there that would have to be made to button everything up. Are there going to be additional requests above and beyond what's on this paper? Because I would like to know the totality of what we're trying to agree to before we come to a number that we would agree to putting into something like this.
I think it would be a really good time to huddle. I've made a statement before that with the state of the state, I believe the Senate should be getting their priorities, the House should be getting theirs, and the governor's as well. If we're going to go down this path, and the governor stated what he would have to have or see not to veto the budget, I think maybe we'd entertain any new proposals the Senate might have, and we'll circle back up and have a real quick discussion as well on the House side.
I think that'd be good, because I think before we come to any agreement, this really is, to me, the buttoning up type document. And I want to make sure there aren't other things that you all may put on the table, or us after such an agreement.
Before we do break, I know that we'd had a conversation about a Geimer project. We'd agreed to that, was going to run that through prep. For conversation for the huddle, I would also recommend that the funding for the levies that we agreed to, 50 mil. I think both houses and carried that for quite some time. That should probably be run through the prep fund as well, and go to the whichever agency that needs it, conservation, water resource board, DEQ. That's something to talk about when we circle back up after the huddle.
Okay.
Is there anything that you perceive that probably needs to be discussed that we have on our agenda before we head out of here for a moment?
I don't believe so. I mean, I think it's our intent to work off this list that's already been provided.
The only thing that I would add, and let me talk to him real quick.
Mr. Chairman, I think that certainly the LCF and the funding for that and the projects remain something that we're going to huddle on and discuss. I think we're real close. I think we're very close. There's another big piece on related to deferred maintenance. You and I have had some good discussions on that, and so I just want to make sure that when we come back, we're both prepared to be able to talk about finalizing and wrapping up the deferred maintenance piece.
Thanks for that. We will be.
Okay, great.
You gonna have a look? You're back. We'll go over to 2:30. More than likely, what time is it right now? 9:40. I always undershoot how long it's going to take for those. So what do you think would be an agreeable time to come back?
How long? 10 minutes, 20 minutes? 10 o'clock, 20 minutes.
Think we can-
I'd say 10, 15.
10:15, I think, to be safe.
10:15 will be.
Good to have everybody back. I just, before we go any further, we're prepared to talk about what it has been in front of us at the time that we left to go huddle up. And so we don't have any additions to that other than what has been proposed and what's in front of us today for any additional discussion. Do you all have anything additional that came from your gathering?
We do have a couple topics that we want to talk about. It's nothing new, but it's just some clarification points. We've had a lot of conversations, some with agreements, some that we currently do not have agreements between the two chambers. One thing I will mention on the education budget, then I'd like to turn it over to Representative Hilbert. It's my understanding we do have an agreement on the additional 2.5 for maternity leave, additional 4.2 for assessments. But I just want clarification and talk about the activities budget a little bit for education.
Yeah, so I think we have agreement here, but just want to make sure we do because I believe this has been brought up in prior budget summits, but we did have a situation one year where we did not have enough money in the activities budget, and then we were on the verge of underfunding the retirement system, and we had a crisis we had to resolve. So just want to make sure we have the right appropriations in there. So on the activities budget, what we have down is the 2.3 million supplemental to get the maternity leave funded for this fiscal year, and then 2.5 million maternity leave for next year. I believe we agreed on 4.2 million in assessments. The ask was 4.7. Superintendent Walters said they could make it happen with 4.2. The 950,000 for the psychologists, et cetera, that line item. And then the off formula fix is a separate bill. And then basically use the activities budget besides that from last year. But if there are any other changes, I would suggest this is presumptuous of me, but assuming we reach a budget agreement today, I do think the education chairs, Chairman McBride and Q, would need to make sure they both feel comfortable with that language probably by the end of the day if we're going to have time to run all this. So I just want to make sure all that sounds amenable.
Yeah, that all sounds agreeable to us, and I think it's my understanding that historically, when we talk about the activities budgets, that the two chairs do sit down and have a discussion. And so I'm reasonably sure that our chairs more than willing to sit down and continue to have those discussions that they've always had in the past.
Great, but that makes sure just having that agreement that we have the dollar amount correct, and then if there's any nuances in it, the chairs can determine that without needing additional dollars. So.
We agree.
And then that 4.2 million of assessments, if I remember right, is coming out of the teacher empowerment fund. Is that what it was called?
Well, so we did have some discussion about that. We would be okay with that, but it just seems to me that the simplest thing would just be to take it straight out of GR.
Okay, so if it was a sentence asked on Friday to take it out of the empowerment fund. If you prefer GR,
I think that'd be simpler for us if you are agreeable to it.
as the House author on Senator Hughes' bill that created or expanded the teacher empowerment fund, I'm great with that. But Mr. Chairman, are you okay with that coming out of GR? Okay.
All right, and that's the direction we'll go on that.
Great, thank you.
All right, go ahead, Mr. Chairman. Did you have something else?
Yes, we've talked about water. I do want to bring up a couple projects, and I know that I believe before we left here, the agreement was 20 million for Diamond, 50 million for the levees, run through prep. We've had conversations about Anita Water Project. I just want to bring that up one more time, and if there is interest in having that with curbs, gutters, and a point to pull back if the full development of the amusement park doesn't happen. Is that something the Senate would entertain?
Well, Mr. Chairman, there is, there's been very little discussion amongst our appropriations teams related to the funding of that kind of project. It's kind of it's something that hasn't gone through really any of our process. I understand that there was a couple of bills out there that may be in conference with no funding in them at all. I also know that there was kind of some a potential issue with the developer that surfaced of late, and I just as a result of all that, I mean, I don't believe that we have a desire to add any new projects from what we've already talked about here on the budget proposals.
All right, I just want to get that out one more time. And there's no other water projects that you guys would like to discuss at all. I was going to make a recommendation if there was, that we consider doing the tribal match program that we've been very successful through ARPA with on anything going forward. But if there's nothing else,
Well, I appreciate that. But of course, we know that through the ARPA process, we will have, that have gone through our working group. We do have another deposit that is headed, assuming coming with the approval of both our respective houses through a JCAB related to ARPA, that there will be some additional tribal grant money made available.
10 million, right? Is that what we?
Mr. Chairman, we have talked a great deal about deferred maintenance, and we're certainly proud of the product that I think that we're very close to coming to. I just want to kind of walk down through the details and see if we can be in agreement of that, if that's all right with you.
sure.
Just for clarification, when we first started, we indicated to you that you were comfortable with discussing everything that's in front of us. I requested that you all let us know if there's any other thing that's out there other than what we've talked about already. Just making sure before we go any further that there'll be no last minute additions from what we're talking about here today.
An item that we've discussed previously, I do believe that we have an agreement, the Senate request for the Workforce Commission. We were at 1 million with unlocking 600,000 roughly, whatever 10% that's in the fund. I'm trying to remember, it was 6.1 or 6.3 million, but anyway, 1.6-ish. The House would propose that we keep the $1 million appropriation, then when we would unlock up to 4 million of the ARPA funds for operations to match the request from the Workforce Commission letter. And in doing so, we would bring back up, and I've mentioned a time or two about the $6 million Department of Defense Workforce Commerce grants.
We were talking workforce. What did you say at the end? I'm sorry.
So the letter that was received, I believe both chambers received from the Workforce Commission, was asking for 5 mil. We are proposing that we keep the agreement that we had, the $1 million appropriation, instead of unlocking the 10% of what's in the fund, that we'd unlock 4 mil that's in the fund for them statutorily. Then that would be their $5 million ask. But in doing so, there's also a workforce development program that has been discussed many times over Commerce for Department of Defense contracts, and we'd like to do that.
Yeah, I appreciate the discussion, Mr. Chairman. I think we're completely comfortable with just staying with the agreement that we had of the million and unlocking the 10%.
So noted. We can move on. The closing fund, there's been many topics and conversation on the governor's closing fund. I believe that both chambers said that they were somewhat acceptable to the governor's request. Is there any new discussions about the closing funds as far as FY24 supplementals or additional on that?
So I concur with your assessment of where the governor's proposals are. We find them reasonable. As it relates to the governor's quick action closing fund request of $20 million, there's a pretty good balance that still remains in unclaimed property. We're at $252 million with the current balance. I think we would be agreeable to the 20 million in the governor's quick action closing fund, but I think we'd like to kind of unlock another $20 million out of the unclaimed property. With the 30 million that we've already used in our budget document, the unclaimed property balance will still be over $200 million if we decided to fund it from that approach.
Have you guys had a conversation with the treasurer about that and what that would impact, if anything?
Have not. What I've done is I've looked at the at the low balance. There's a lot of good money that has come in there. The low balance, the low water mark for us has been $165 million. Like I said, they're sitting on 252 million currently. With the 30 million coming out that we'd already agreed to, it seems like that another 20 out of there, keeping them at $200 million. Where the current balance is, just kind of makes sense.
So for clarification, make sure I'm understanding on the revenue line of us sweeping from unclaimed property, 30 is the agreement. You're proposing that we go to 50 and the additional 20 will go exactly where?
To the governor's quick action closing fund.
So now we're talking about a number of 40 mil for FY '25.
No, we're just talking about yeah. So what we're proposing is that the 30 that we were using for ops would stay there for ops. It'd just be 20 million that we would use of the 50 that would go to the governor's quick action closing fund.
I'd like to continue that conversation a little bit more. So with the cash position, and then I know you guys are probably running a tally just like we do based on what we have looked on the spreadsheet. What is your currently, and I know it's probably going to move a bit, what is your current remaining authorization balance for appropriation?
Well, I mean, we can work through that number, but I guess what you're wanting to discuss today on this particular line item that we are, whether or not we're funding the governor's quick action closing fund request. And I'm telling you that we're prepared to do that. I'm suggesting a place where the dollars could come from to fund that request.
What I'm having a conversation about is why do you want to take additional out of the unclaimed property when we're probably sitting on a balance somewhere about 1.5 billion and appropriating authority for FY '25?
I'm just suggesting that the treasurer's balance of 252 million is, and we historically have always taken some of that unclaimed property fund, and there's a substantial balance in there that would allow us to do so.
I guess in my counter, since I am negotiation and good faith and being productive, I believe the House's position is we would agree to 10 million additional coming out of that unclaimed property, but then funding out cash, the balance of the 10 for the 20 ask.
Mr. Chairman, if I could just have a sidebar real quick.
Sure.
Chili tells me no.
We never agreed.
That's the same conversation as. This is the cash agreement so far.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I appreciate you giving us a few minutes to speak, and we would certainly extend the same grace if needed on your side too. So we appreciate it very much. We've evaluated your suggestion. I think that's something that we can accept. I think we would be willing to do the 10 million that you referred to, along with the 10 million from unclaimed property. I think our clear point on this is that we would do this based on the governor's direct request of just the 20 million only, that we put that in 25 for one time. And I believe that falls in line with exactly what he said, exactly what he was suggesting.
House will be agreeable with that, and then since have just started discussing revenue, I do want to have a conversation. I know that the House's position has been all along to sweep the 145 back into prep. Are you guys carrying, I know, a $20 million sweep back to prep at this time? Is that correct? And then we agreed the 50 mil. Will that be coming out of 145 as well? Or are we going to do the appropriation over to prep?
Yeah, right now we had identified it as just coming out of a cash, but if you want to take it out of that 145, I think we'd be agreeable to it.
Would you say?
They already plan on leaving in commerce. Yes. They're not planning on sweeping.
They don't have the full sweep on their sheet.
But what you just agreed to was sweeping 70, correct?
What we agreed to was sweeping. Yeah,
50 and 20. Yeah.
that's right, 50 and 20.
Okay, we're in agreement with you as well. The funding of prep right now for the two water projects will come from a sweep of 70 million from the 145, setting in commerce into prep.
We agree.
And we're leaving the balance in that fund at Commerce.
That's correct.
I guess in same fashion, any other items on revenue that we need to discuss? I thought we were pretty much in a line.
I think we're in alignment on the revenue side.
That we have. Yeah, we're
All
still
right.
showing y'all come up to 7.8 on the Secretary of State.
7.8 on both sweeps from
Yeah.
insurance and Secretary of State.
Mr. Chairman, I'm hoping that we could get to a conclusion on these last minute things. We can refocus on the sheets that are in front of us. Are you comfortable with that?
Yes.
Are we at a
I thought the
conclusion?
Senate moved to the revenue sheet. That's why we're here. Yes, let's move forward on the sheet from.
Well, what I wanted to do was, once we identify that there's no additional ask other than what's in front of us, and I think we've covered that. I think we're to a point now where we can talk about what's in front of us now. Are you agreeable to that?
I am, but my items pertain to that last sheet.
Okay. Well, I want to lay out deferred maintenance if we can. And I want to make sure that we're in agreement here, and I believe that we're very close, if not in full agreement. We have a $350 million deposit that we had already agreed to that would go into what we're referencing as the OCAMP fund. Of that, I think that we're in agreement that we would make available for deferred maintenance projects $125 million in the first year. And then over the course of the next 4 years, we would make available for deferred maintenance projects at $75,000 per year between 26, 27, at 3 years,
75 million. I'm assuming.
75 million, right. For 3 years, for 26, 27, and 28. And then that would deplete the 350 million, but we would also have we've agreed to an apportionment that would come in for $50 million starting in 2029. So when you talk about the allocations of these funds, and there's 2 steps here. One is for the first year utilization of the 125, and then the years following that. So in the first year, what we're in agreement to is that the percentage allocations of that 125 would be 45% going to state assets or state buildings. We would have 10% to tourism, and we would have 45% to higher education. Now, in the allocation of those, what I'm proposing, and I think what we've talked about before, is that we would take a list from OMES as it relates to the state buildings of their deferred maintenance needs in the first year, and we would allow them to prioritize those deferred maintenance needs with the dollars that they have available to them. On the higher ed piece, I believe that we would be comfortable with working with a list that's provided by higher ed for deferred maintenance requests, and then authorize them in working with the schools to identify their priorities for the dollars that we would make available to them. The percentages for the higher ed, just making sure that we're clear, that in year 1 for the research universities, we have no deferred maintenance dollars going to them. But for the 4s, we have a 70% allocation of those available funds going for deferred maintenance. And then for the 2s, we would make available 30% of their funds. For tourism, what we're proposing is we know that tourism and parks have a list of deferred maintenance needs. What we're proposing is that we allow them to work off that list and make priority what's important to them, as long as that the list that we're working from is related to the state park system only. And I think that just makes sense, that if it's part of the state park system, it can be included on the list for recommendations for deferred maintenance. And that the Parks and Tourism Director could make that decision on priority from that list. And then moving to the second phase of this, when the commission is set up, as we've talked about, where they would set the prioritization for these projects, we would have the ongoing structure at 45% for state assets, 10% for tourism, and 45% for higher ed. But yet, on the higher ed percentages after the first year, the research universities would be back into the formula at 20%, 50% for the 4s, and 30% for the 2s.
So for clarification, on the state asset list that came from OMES, it was basically just the Capitol complex. I would be for expanding that list to include all state-owned property, even outside of 23rd and Lincoln.
So I appreciate that. I mean, I'm defining it as, and we can talk this through, but I consider the Capitol complex to be outside of 23rd and Lincoln. I think some of the buildings that they proposed, which were legitimate deferred maintenance, we talked about, air handlers and coolers and those kind of things that need to be replaced. So we're not just talking about the Capitol building, we're talking about the Capitol complex. I do believe that is the intent of both of us to expand that outside of the Capitol complex prospectively. But I would like the commission to be able to, to receive their reports and make their recommendations beginning in year 2. It just seems that we can more accurately focus on a very specific list in year 1 if we just agree that the list I think we've both seen of the projects for the Capitol complex would make it a lot easier in year 1. And then I'm more than willing and very acceptable to broadening that out to state-owned assets beginning in year 2.
I think we'll need to put direction in that for the OHMS projects to include all state-owned property, not just the complex here to the north, a few buildings. Also on the sunset of the percentages, it was agreed to, and I think it's very important that the future legislature has an opportunity to come back and reevaluate and decide if the percentages are still in line with the needs for both higher ed, tourism, and state complexes. So that would be sunsetting July 1 of 28, which is FY 29.
We're in agreement.
The only other thing that I'll add, and yes, we moved our number from 335 mil towards your request of a higher number at 350. And I know that this discussion.
Of course, the original request was 500.
I fully am aware.
And so we dropped it down dramatically.
Yes. And so this first year out of the back, nothing to the researchers because of an agreed to fund out of LCF, the research university's request through that fund. The House is agreeable. We still have a major discussion, which I'm optimistic that we'll find common ground on the funding for LCF.
I hope to work towards that common ground. Mr. Chairman, we talked about the governor's points. I think that we both agree that they were reasonable in nature. We talked about the unclaimed or the governor's quick action closing fund and how we would take care of that. Still looms that piece out there of the judicial pay that he requested. We had in our budget built in a 6%. You all had a built in at 8%. The governor, I think when he was here, and I want to put words in his mouth, but my memory was 6, 7, 8, 9%, whatever you all come up with. It just seems it would be the easiest agreement for us to come to would be at to split the difference between 6 and 8 and come to 7.
Not to put word in the governor's mouth either, but I think I did hear a number as high as 10. Not to rehash old discussions, the House would agree to that as long as we can come to an agreement on judicial evaluations for the citizens of the state of Oklahoma.
Mr. Chairman, I mean, all I'm trying to do is honor the suggestion that the governor of the state of Oklahoma had related to judicial pay. Did not hear him tie it to evaluations in any regard, and I think that the Senate would be completely comfortable with just doing the 7% and honoring the governor's request for judicial pay.
And that request was only to give judicial pay for the district courts.
We're prepared to honor that request. Mr. Chairman, I think he did, and maybe that's what your huddle's about. He had district courts in there too, as well.
I think that was his only.
Yeah, just the district courts.
With funding the district courts, increased pay and judicial pay, it will also have a rippling effect through the DAs as well.
A statutory requirement, as you're talking about, that is tying those two.
District attorney's pays is based on a percentage of 95% of district court or judge pay.
The district court judges. We would honor whatever the statutory requirement is there. I don't know how much that bumps
the DA's up? I don't know what that line item would be. Do you have that offhand?
It's gonna be the same percentage of pay.
What, no, no, I understand, but what is that dollar figure? I'm sorry.
We've got a number.
Yeah,
For DAs.
8, 9, what do you got?
All three.
Does that impact OIDs as well, or is it only statutorily tied to the DA's?
Just the DAs.
373. I've got 373, 710.
Yeah, staff, if you want to get on the mic, both of you concur, and if you agree on a number, then we can continue the discussion.
So from our staff upstairs, we have at a 7% increase for the DAs, 373, 710, rounding up 8 cents.
Those numbers sound reasonable.
Go that again, 373.
373, 710, and I'm currently waiting on the courts to give us the 7% district court judge with the 2 additional judges.
The other word that we always like to talk about around here is parity, but if we're going to give DAs a raise, I think we have to have a discussion about the awards. You don't want to give prosecutors pay more than public.
We agree 100%. I was the public safety subcommittee chair, and that's the reason that I had that question. So I don't know what that dollar figure is, but I assume that our
Same 7%.
able, I understand the percent. I don't know the dollar figure again.
I'm
Yeah.
just saying that so we
Yeah.
get it on the right.
Yes, sir.
7%.
Yes.
We'd be,
Yeah.
we'd be in line with them.
Anthony, do you know a number offhand on that?
You're only covering the 27 DAs with this.
The House will agree on whatever the hard costs are for the raise with benefits, we would cover, for engine defense.
Do we need a
or not.
huddle on that? What do you?
We can build that in the hard number, whatever it is it's going to be.
I think Anthony's point to me was that if I'm hearing him correct, that just applies to the DAs, not their ADAs, and OIDs would be through the entire system. Is that what you're suggesting?
You're only covering the pay raise for the elected officials.
Eccles, you got any thoughts, comments?
Agreed. I mean, we know Wade's is underfunded compared to the DAs. And by the way, I can't stress enough, the DAs are underfunded too. But I would think, I mean, frankly, what I would think would make the most sense is our public safety chairs can get together. Even if we do put some money in Wade's, it's going to be a small number. Probably needs to be a little more thought out by the subcommittee chairs than doing it right now. But I think we would have to look at some type of parity if we're going to add additional funding for the DAs, which is a good thing we should do. But probably a little parity for the Wade's too.
I just, what is the total OIDs budget? I don't even know that offhand.
Right now, right now it's $24,731,713. And the district attorneys, before this pay raise would be $81,688,000.
And all I would suggest is what would make the most sense is to let because we're not talking about a massive number in a $12 billion budget. Let our public safety chairs get together and decide what makes sense.
Mr. Chairman, our subcommittee chair just walked in. Give us just a second to confer with him.
No problem.
Responded to your text immediately.
Well, you gotta know your audience.
I think we need to, we're trying to get parity, but we need to have some conversations offline to figure out where we're really at on that.
All right, you want to move forward, we can circle back up on that discussion on,
Yeah, I think ultimately we can get there, but we need to have a discussion, working with our subcommittee chair and kind of figure out that parity number. So we set that aside with the intent that we want to be, that parity is important.
sounds good, and I just want to be on the record one more time. I do think the judicial evaluations is a critical component for the citizens of the state of Oklahoma. As we continue to give pay raises without evaluations, is not the position that I want to be in.
Mr. Chairman, as you've said several times at this table, we note your comments.
Thank you for noting. We're down to that one.
LCF,
There we go.
yeah, LCF.
So
So
if you're gonna let me have the floor first, I would appreciate it.
we'll listen to you.
So, we did some really great good faith negotiating. I thought we came to the middle, but I want to point out, there's a Senate bill, 1433. The Senate position was for 160 million for LCF. House position's always been 350, hadn't changed. Would gladly meet you in the middle at 255 mil.
So, Mr. Chairman, let me be clear. Are you changing your position that we all went in and talked about related to 175 million, where you were at? Have you changed that position?
I just want to make sure everybody knows that the Senate's position was at 160. The House position was at 350. I'm here to negotiate in good faith. Now, if you want the last sentence, it will be the House will go no lower than what we proposed at 175. That is cut off.
Well, Mr. Chairman, I think we've worked long and hard on these projects. I think that we all agree that they are good projects. I'm learning quickly that in every budget, none of us ever get what it is that we want, and no budget is perfect. I want to make it clear that as has been the case, and hopefully prospectively, that any projects that we do that are brought up, of course, we can't control directly future legislation, but it would be our intent that each one of these requests in the future be specific bills that run themselves through the process. It seems like that we find ourselves many times saying, well, where did this come from last minute, or where did this come from last minute? And I think you would agree that it is a good, transparent process to have these requests introduced, whether it be by agency or other legislators, right out of the gate, so that they can be vetted through subcommittees and appropriations committees, and then on the floor for a vote. Would you agree to that?
The process that was established last year when we agreed and created, there's never a project that is not funded out of LCF that's not a standalone bill and authorization. There's light of day on every project, and I agree that's the way it should continue to run.
Mr. Chairman, I, in hopes and that we can be very, very close to, and I believe that this is our last holdout. I'm also assuming, although we didn't get full clarification, that you all are agreeable to how we allocate the dollars through the deferred maintenance using those lists that come from OMES and the regents and from parks. And that we clearly define that these are from the state park system only. I just want to make sure that we're in agreement there on the deferred maintenance plan.
To requote you as well, no one gets everything they want. House, Senate, individual members, or the governor. I fully understand what the statement was. We do agree to it. It's not the way that I would have ran it, but I think it is the consideration and compromise that's actually the best thing for the state of Oklahoma. So we will accept that, and we'll have a new session to work on amending or moving forward on the.
Mr. Chairman, with all that said, we had really kind of two pieces that are left out yet. Is coming to the LCF deposit. We also had the water quality piece that looms out there. Mr. Chairman, we are looking at your $175 million deposit request to LCF. We would like to amend that number. We are suggesting that instead of $175 million deposit to LCF, that it be $177 million deposit to LCF, and that we come to an agreement that we don't do the water quality piece.
Then the house's position would be, there's one other item, I believe it was on the offers from Friday Encounters. We will accept that offer, and then we would like to eliminate the one time of $150,000 from the Oklahoma Educational Television Authority, OETA.
Mr. Chairman, I hate that we are down to potentially $150,000. We talked about this around this table at least once, maybe twice, is my memory, that we've always considered that an operational piece to OETA. Understand some of the background. We've talked to your staff, and our staff has talked back and forth. We don't see that there is a equipment removal need, that this is baked in as operational expenses for OETA. And I guess I'm just curious of your intent or your desire to cut the operating budget of OETA as part of this process.
We don't have it booked as part of operations. We definitely had it booked for capital investments on video. The year before it was for HAVCs, last year for FY24. I'm trying to think the exact list that was put out there for equipment. So we do not feel we're cutting the operation budget at all. Tell you what, in the spirit of doing what's right, why don't we just split it? We'll pull 75. You guys can add 75 to the operations for FY25, or leave it in, not add, but leave it in. We get a deal.
Over 150,000, I mean, Mr. Chairman, we came up dramatically on our deposit to LCF. I know this is, it's important to the House. These projects are important. We've moved a long ways.
Okay, what about this? So we can settle this issue and circle back to our final issue on OIDs. The transmitters is also something that's still out there that we hadn't agreed to yet because we had tied that to water quality. If we fund the transmitters at 2.85 million, we agree to your number of booking 150K in operations, and then they can go raise the balance of the 3 million from their foundation.
Well, I understand what you're saying, but I was under the impression that we were working with a complete list for the OE, in which the transmitters were included in that at 3. And so
we've had those tied together all along. So this would be us coming to your position of taking the water quality off. We've had water quality, the water quality tied to the transmitters. And so this would be us coming to your position of taking water quality off. And we would come to your position of funding 2.85 million of a $3 million ask on the transmitters.
Well, but you're taking water quality off. I was under because of the additional deposit that we were making to LCF when we came to the 177. So my thought was that was off the table.
I thought you covered the 177 was trying to meet us somewhere closer to halfway between 160 and 350 at 255.
I believe my comment was very clear, that we'd come to 177, but we wanted the water quality off the table. And I thought that was something that we were working to agree into.
Just meet us in the middle and let's
That's what I offered,
shake hands.
75. Do we want to engage the people in the room?
Speaker-elect, would you restate your proposal? We came up $101 million on the deposit to LCF from our position at 76.
Your first offer was 100, your bill was 160, but
The-
semantics.
It was a single member's bill. And so we're within 175,000 to fully fund transmitters that are used for public safety purposes, for weather alerts in many of our communities that aren't covered in the other area. I think it's a completely reasonable request. The operations side of it, we've had that booked. I understand and respect that you have not had it booked there. But I think we have in good faith come to many of your positions. You have come to many of ours. I think this is an easy one to figure out, and then we can go, the OIDS part, we need to go back and forth to make sure we get that right. But I think if you come to that 150, we have a budget deal that we can all be proud of.
All right, I agree, public safety, broadcasting, same thing, but I would venture to say quality of water is very, very important. Public safety of mankind as well. I'm going to reposition the offer that you made just for a counter. I'm content with the 175 in LCF. We fund the 2 mil for water quality, and we'll concede the 150 to you.
And the 3 million to the transmitters.
Maybe we say yes.
Yeah, well, Mr. Chairman, I think what we would now be prepared to do is go back to your offer prior to the 2.85.
It's a compromise.
All right, so
Good.
let's make sure we're saying the same thing. So $2.85 million one time for transmitters, $150,000 for operations, and we take the $2 million water quality off the table.
And you're at 177 for the deposit.
And we're at 177 in the deposit. Mr. Chairman, does that have us in agreement of everything except the OIDS issue we need to get a dollar amount on?
I believe it does. I know there was additional requests and compromise and asks from both the Senate and the House, and including the governor in the beginning of this whole budget process.
Well, Mr. Chairman, I think we're really close to a handshake deal. I think what we need to do is maybe take a quick break, settle on the OIDS funding piece, and then circle back just as soon as possible and see where we're at. And then I think that we could have some nice speeches to each other.
I would agree that we circle up. I would request that both our director and your director actually run the numbers, make sure they're all in parity as far as your spreadsheet versus ours as well. And then we will have a final number on the OIDS cost also. Then plug in and let us know what it is. And then we come back. But I do want to make sure the spreadsheets are balancing between both the Senate and the House.
Well, we definitely want to give our staff time to be able to do that. Is this something that we want to try to complete before noon? I think it'd be awfully quick to do in the next 45 minutes. Otherwise, we could take a lunch break and circle back right at 1 or 1:30 if our staff believes that gives them plenty of time.
We have session at 1:30 that we cannot miss, so we will be done with session if I was guessing, but
That's what I was gonna say. We come back at 1 o'clock if that's ample time, but there's a hard stop for the House at 1:30.
Let me just defer to my staff. So I believe the 1 o'clock time frame works for us. We can circle back here at 1 o'clock and have our numbers reconciled. Sound good?
That sounds good.
All right, thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Appreciate it.
Yeah,
Hold on just a second, I think
Pro
that-
Tem,
No other items added, just dealing with OIDs and reconciling our books,
And
correct?
then we need to talk through each of the limits bills and JCAP bills, but that's
Yeah,
not. in
That's a
appropriations.
later discussion.
Yeah.
Yes, 1 o'clock will be.
Sounds good. Thank you.
And please, we will be on time.
Okay, we will too.